When I was 22 years old, I visited Europe for the first time in my life. And I'm not gonna lie, just visiting Europe was enough to completely shift my whole entire worldview. So much so that at the age of 23, I actually ended up moving to Europe, and I stayed in Europe for 14 months. And technically, I do still live there. I am in the US right now for my sister's wedding. We've been here for a few months, my girlfriend and I, but we are gonna be leaving the US here in the next couple of days. But being back in the US and being able to directly compare and contrast living in both Europe and America has helped me broaden my horizons even further in terms of the lies that we are told growing up here in the US. The first of which being the American dream. So the American dream is this idea that's heavily propagated in American society. If anything, it's really the foundation of American society. It's this idea that anybody can come to America and make anything of themselves because there is unlimited upward mobility. Now, I'm not saying that the premise isn't true, because it is technically true that just about anybody can come to America and make something of themselves. They can change the trajectory of their bloodline for future generations by simply putting in the work. I'm not here to say that that's not true. Granted, I do believe that upward mobility is definitely overblown in American society, especially with the prevalence of student loan debt, which I can touch on more in a second. But this idea that anybody can come to America and become anything, while it is technically true, I mean, it is a free country, at least for now, it's also true in Europe. It is also very, very true in Europe. And something that I found whenever I moved to Europe, because I moved to the Netherlands on the DAFT visa, which is basically the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty, which allows entrepreneurs to move from America and establish businesses in the Netherlands. So that's exactly what I did. Now, mind you, I had never moved to a different country before, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. But the process was so simple and straightforward in terms of starting a business that I was able to navigate the process with very few, if any, hiccups at all. And I'm saying this to say that, look, I don't know about all of Europe, but the places that I've been to in Europe, at least within the European Union, make it fairly easy to establish businesses or go to college or get good jobs. It's all possible. I don't know where this idea that upward mobility is exclusively an American thing comes from, but it's just not true. It is simply not true. Now, again, it is possible to change your bloodline's trajectory here in the US. I know this because I have family members, including my dad, who did it. But again, this is also possible in Europe. And actually, to my point about student loans, I believe that because of how expensive and exorbitant student loans are here in the US, where you have 18-year-olds who are widely encouraged to incur $50,000 to $100,000 in debt before they can even legally drink beer. I mean, that has to hurt upward mobility, because people are paying those loans off for decades, because it's not just the loans, it's the interest. And as far as I'm aware, aside from entrepreneurship, college, higher education, has always been the most accessible vehicle for that upward mobility. So making that less accessible to your average American citizen, forcing them to go into that kind of debt at such a young age, is kind of counterproductive in my opinion. But why is the American dream such a widely marketed idea? Why do people continue to drink the Kool-Aid? So I actually have a theory that I've developed over the past couple of weeks, and it's a very simple theory, but I think it explains why people in America believe that the American dream is exclusively an American thing. The reason why is because a lot of people who propagate that idea are not actually from America. A lot of the people who propagate that idea are from third world countries. So places like Mexico, India, El Salvador, so on and so forth. The Philippines, third world countries where it is true that the opportunities are extremely limited. And for anyone who's fortunate enough to move to a first world country, even if it's America, they're going to experience a substantial improvement, not only in their day-to-day quality of life, but also in the opportunities they have at their disposal. So of course, somebody who's coming here from Mexico, where maybe in Mexico they had no job prospects at all, someone who can come here and even work a lower end manual labor type of job, or two of those types of jobs, but put their children in a better position to experience going to an American school and going to an American college, even if with loans or whatever. Of course, those people are going to propagate the American dream because it's true for them. But again, it's not just true in the US, it's true in Europe as well. And in my opinion, because of the student loans, it's actually more true in Europe now. And again, even if you're an entrepreneur, it is very, very easy to set up a business and run a business overseas. Taxes, all of that is very straightforward. I was able to do it very, very easily. And again, I didn't know anything about any of that. I don't even have a business established technically here in the US, and I was able to figure it out. And on top of that, they have a lot of tax breaks for entrepreneurs in the Netherlands, at least. I don't know about the other European countries, but I imagine if the Netherlands has them, then most other countries will have them as well, to encourage entrepreneurship. And again, they have visas specifically for entrepreneurs. So the Dutch dream is real. The Swiss dream is real. They are just as real as the American dream. The American dream, being exclusively an American thing, is simply a lie in 2025, and I don't imagine that will change anytime soon. Now, the next lie, the next American lie that was instantly dispelled upon arriving in Europe back in 2023 when I visited Spain and briefly Switzerland, was the idea that Europe is for rich people. Now, if you're European, hearing that might sound a little bit strange. Europe is for rich people. What do you mean? Well, here in the US, you need to understand that there are two kinds of people who go to Europe. There are the backpacker hippie types, which I probably fall more into that category. And then there are rich people who go to Switzerland to ski every winter, or go to the south of France in the summer and go on boating trips or whatever. I don't even know what those people do in Europe, but I know that that's kind of a stereotype, is that rich people generally travel overseas and just do a lot more international travel in general. Whereas for your average American, they're never gonna have that opportunity. Most Americans, and again, I mean, we talk about the American dream and having upward mobility. For all that talk, a lot of those people are never able to leave America. I wonder why that's the case. But anyways, if you're able to travel overseas, you are seen as a very privileged person. Unless you have a study abroad opportunity or something like that. And of course, that's going to incur a lot of costs in addition to the regular college costs. That's something that your average American is simply not going to do. And because of that, there's this stereotype and this widely accepted belief that traveling to Europe is for rich people. And look, booking overseas international flights is expensive. I'll be the first to tell you that right now. It is expensive. I've spent probably at least a few $1,000s on international flights in the past couple of years. It's expensive, but here's the caveat. When you get to Europe, what I found is that Europe is actually cheaper than the US. And of course, a lot of it depends on how you travel, your personal preferences. So there's a thing called slow travel, where you basically stay in a place for an extended period of time. And when you do that, you end up spending a lot less, or at least getting more for your money, because again, the most expensive part of traveling for most people is really going to be the flights. It's just going to be getting there. Once you're there, groceries, rent, hotels, things of that nature, I've personally found are generally a lot cheaper than here in the US, especially groceries, which for a lot of people is going to be their main cost outside of their living accommodations. So Europe is not just for rich people. In fact, there are quite a few people in Europe as well who are just getting by. Now, those people, they still travel internationally because European countries are smaller. So if you live in, let's say, Belgium, it doesn't really take much money or much effort on your behalf, or even much planning, to take a day trip to the Netherlands. You can get a train ticket, get there and back within the same day. I know because I've done it in the reverse way. I went to Belgium, came back, same day, cost maybe $50 in total, 50 euros that is. So European people, for them, international travel is normal. The average European has been to multiple different countries. The average American has not. And of course, part of that is because of the general isolation of the US and the size and scale. I mean, I know I've mentioned this in many videos recently, but my girlfriend and I took a van life trip across the US where we basically covered the distance from Lisbon, Portugal to Moscow, Russia twice. 2 times over we covered that distance, all while staying within the US, and we still didn't see a pretty decent portion of the country. We maybe saw close to half of it. So, of course, for somebody who's living on the interior of the US, an international flight is going to be pretty expensive. And you're going to Canada or maybe Mexico, or the Bahamas or somewhere like that. But in terms of traveling to Europe, that's just not even something that most Americans can ever consider doing. And because of that, they're not able to actually see for themselves what I saw, which is that when you land in Spain, you realize that, wow, I'm paying literally half as much for groceries and the food is higher quality. And then I don't need a car because they have public transit and biking lanes. So now I don't have to pay for a car anymore. And really, in many ways, a lot of what makes traveling to Europe expensive, and I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but if there's an American watching this who wants to travel to Europe, I'm putting you on some free game right now. What makes it expensive is the fact that you're still paying for a life back in America as well. But imagine if you stopped paying American rent, you got rid of your car, you sold it off, and you simply went to Europe and lived in different countries for a few months at a time. You would actually probably save money, or at the very worst, break even. Now, of course, you have to be able to make money online or have some kind of remote work in place to be able to do that, but that's a different discussion for a different day. The point is, Europe is not just for rich people by any means. And even if you are that backpacking hippie type, there are hostels. Hostel culture is much more prevalent in Europe. And then on top of that, again, public transit is much more extensive. So even traveling from country to country is much cheaper than you probably think it is. Now, the next thing, the next American lie that was instantly dispelled upon moving to Europe is the idea that more equals better. So growing up here in the US, a big part of the American dream, a big part of the idea of becoming the person who can take the trips to Europe, to the ski towns in Switzerland or whatever else, is this notion that when you make more money, you can buy more things. And when you buy more things, you garner more respect from the people around you. And when I was younger, I subscribed to this idea very, very heavily. And if you've been following my channel for the past 5 or 6 years, then you know that for sure. You know that I was a very ambitious person. And that's not to say I'm not an ambitious person now, but my ambitions now are more so centered on experiences. I more so want to experience things rather than acquire things. When I was younger, it was all about acquisition. I wanted to get more things. I wanted to get more money first so that I could buy more things, better things than other people had, so that I could garner respect and status. And it wasn't until I moved to the Netherlands and spent enough time there that I realized that not every society functions that way. There are actually places where having nicer things doesn't really garner more respect or status from your peers. And that was very, very eye-opening for me. In fact, that's probably the single biggest way that living in Europe altered my way of being, is I don't really pursue the material pleasures anymore. And that's not to say I don't have an affinity for nice things, but I see things in a much more pragmatic way now. I don't really see the need to have this 6-bedroom house in a new neighborhood with no trees or anything. If it's just my girlfriend and I, it's just 2 of us, why do we need a 6-bedroom house? Why do we need 5 cars? Why do we need Ferraris and Rolls Royces and things like that? If, I mean, you can't even drive above 40 miles per hour on most roads anyways. Why do you need a supercar? And again, I'm not saying that these things are intrinsically bad. It's more so the foundational desire beneath the idea of having those things, which is getting those things not for my own enjoyment and own pleasure, but for the sake of garnering status and respect from other people. Again, I'm not saying that this doesn't exist in Europe, not saying that that dynamic doesn't exist at all, but it definitely doesn't rule society in the same way that it does here. And because of that, I've noticed that European people tend to be much less materialistic, which ultimately means that everyone is content with having less. And when I say less, I don't necessarily mean that Europeans are living a lower quality of life. In fact, Europeans on average are living a higher quality of life because you don't have as many people vying for the material resources by any means necessary. People are much more concerned with well-being than they are with outperforming their peers. And I'm not gonna lie, before I moved to Europe, I didn't really know that was possible. I always just thought humans are intrinsically selfish, everyone's gonna do what's in their best interest, and if I don't do the same thing, then I'm fooling myself, and I'm setting myself up for failure. And again, living in the Netherlands, I don't know if maybe other parts of Europe are a little bit different in this regard, but living in the Netherlands at least, where people are primarily pragmatic and people are much more concerned and preoccupied with the overall well-being, not just of themselves, but of those around them, than they are with the idea of outperforming those around them. Once I exposed myself to that line of thinking, I realized that much of my life up to that point had been a lie.